All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let's begin. We have, Baruch Hashem, a lot to do today. Today's daf is Kuf Beis 102. We are picking up from Kuf Aleph Amud Beis. And we have, as I said, a lot to do. So we'll say we're picking up Kuf Aleph Amud Beis 101b. We're picking up at the first of the widest lines, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 14 lines up from the bottom. We will meet Hashem. Okay, good. It's going to be good. So our shir this morning is dedicated by Yonah and Shoshi Ehrenfeld in commemoration of the upcoming yahrzeit of Yonah's grandfather, Reb Gedalia ben Yaakov HaKohen. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his neshama will have an aliyah and a family in Nechama. Also, in this chus of Refuah Shlema for Sima Haken, for Sima Bas Miriam, who's having surgery today. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, she will have a complete and enduring refuah. So we'll say, so let's begin. So it says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, we'll say first wide line, Kuf Aleph Amud Beis. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mifnei Mazach Yeravam L'Malchus. Why did Yeravam merit to become king? Because ultimately, again, he gave Musar to Shlomo HaMelech. Meaning, when Shlomo was doing something wrong, he gave Musar to Shlomo. And ultimately, again, why was he punished? Because he admonished Shlomo publicly. Meaning, he gave Musar, that was good, but he embarrassed Shlomo publicly, that was not good. Shneimar, Bana as Amilo, Sagar as Paris ear David Aviv. Sagar as Paris ear David Aviv. Amrlo. David Avicha paras pirtos bechoma kedei shialu Yisrael regel va'ata gedarta osam kedei lasos angai lebas paro. So we'll say, so the Gemara says the following: Shlomo HaMelech had sealed off some of the entrances into Yerushalayim because he wanted to build a beautiful residence for Bas Paro. So Yeravam gives him Musar. You know, your father David made as many entrances into Yerushalayim as possible to accommodate the flow of Ovei Regel, the people coming into Yerushalayim, and you are sealing off entrances to build a palace for your idolatrous wife. So he gave him Musar, but he gave him Musar publicly. And again, the sign of disrespect that Yeravam gave to the king was that he removed his tefillin in the presence of the king. So removing your tefillin in the presence of someone, at least historically, was considered to be an act of disrespect. So the one goes right. Rav Nachman, Yeravam's gaiva is something that removed him from this world. Shneimar Yomi Yeravam belibo ata tashul hamamlacha lebeis David. If so, we'll say, remember again. So Yeravam becomes king. So now Yeravam. You know, we'll say sometimes Yeravam was very reticent to assume the monarchy. But there's an interesting thing that happens with people. So they might be reticent to assume power. Yet what? Once you give them power, they can't get enough of it. See, Yeravam doesn't want it, but once he gets it, he's scared of losing it. So he has to come up with a plan. So what's the plan? Yeravam says to himself, so he says, here's the issue. The issue is, right now, I control 10 of the tribes. But if they go up to Yerushalayim 3 times a year, it's only a matter of time until they once again pledge their allegiance to the Davidic king, to Rechavam, and I'm going to lose my entire kingdom. So what did he do? Here's the issue. The issue is, the only people who are permitted to sit in the Azar, in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, are Davidic kings. So if they see Rechavam, who was the son of Shlomo HaMelech, sitting in the Azar because he's a Davidic king, and they see me standing, they're going to say, oh, he's the king, and Yeravam is an Eved. So what happens? And if I sit in the Azara, then that's an act of rebellion on my part against the Davidic line. So what should we do? And they'll kill me. And they'll follow Rechavam. Vayomer Alehem Rav Lochem Elos Yerushalayim Hine Elokecha Yisrael Asher Luchem Eretz Yisrael Vayasam Asa Echad Bebeisel Ve'asa Echad Nasan Bidan. So the Gemara says, so what does he do? He comes up with what he thought was a great idea. He builds 2 golden calves. And he puts one of them in Beit El, one of them in Dan, and ultimately again he says to the members of his kingdom, there is no need for you to ascend to Jerusalem anymore. You could worship God right at these 2 sites. My vayoitz, I'm Rabbi Yehuda Shehoshiv Rasha Eitzel Tzadik. So listen to this, I will say. So how did Yeravam ben Nevat go ahead and solidify his rule over his kingdom? So also remember, he establishes 2 golden calves. Now it begins as a suggestion. it later on becomes law. You are not allowed to ascend to Yerushalayim under the penalty of death. He posted soldiers by the golden calves, and if you try to ascend to Yerushalayim, you'd be executed by his sentries. So how does Yeravam ben Nevat solidify his hold over the kingdom? So watch this. He convened his cabinet, and in his cabinet he had tzaddikim and he had rishayim. He put tzaddikim next to Rishayim. And what happens? Will you guys sign off on everything that I do? So what Yeravam ben Nevat was asking for was, do I have your allegiance? Do I have your allegiance? And they said, yes, you have our allegiance. You're our king. Whatever you want to do, do. He says, I want to be the king. I want to solidify my throne. Sure, no problem, it's yours. So they said, he said to them, I want you to know that anything I tell you to do, you will do. They said, of course. He says, even if I tell you to worship idolatry, I want to know that you're going to comply. So the tzaddikim who are part of the cabinet over here said, God forbid, chas v'shalom, we should do something like that to worship idolatry. So the Rishayim convinced the tzaddikim. They said, no. Yeravam is not serious. He's not really going to worship idolatry. Rather, he's testing our allegiance. What he's saying is, even if I asked you to go ahead and worship idolatry, would you be willing to do it? And it was a test of allegiance. But he would never, chas v'shalom, ask us to do it. So even the tzaddikim were convinced. And they said, okay, top of Kuf Beis, v'af achi ashiloni ta'ah v'chasam. So what happens? So Yeravam ben Nevat, drafts this kingdom charter, this charter for the kingdom. And the charter for the kingdom, it says, I am the king, I am the absolute monarch, whatever I say you will do, even if I tell you to worship idolatry. And when this becomes the charter, and then Yeravam ben Nevat actually goes ahead and sets up the two golden calves, so the general populace assumes that everyone, even the tzaddikim, are supportive of this particular endeavor. Even the prophet Achia Shiloni made a mistake and ultimately went ahead and signed onto this decree. Listen to this. Yehu tzaddik rabba. Yehu, who was one of the kings, was a great tzaddik. Shneimar, vayomer shlomo Yehu, ya'ar asher tivos alasas yashav be'enei, kichol asher belvav yasis l'beisachav, b'nei revim, yeshu l'cha kisei Yisrael. Yehu, Moshe was given the command by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to wipe out the family of Yeravam ben Nevat. So the Gemara says, "Uksiv v'yehu lo shamar lalechas b'toras Hashem Elokei Yisrael b'chol levavo lo sar me'al chatas Yeravam asher hechti es Yisrael." So yet there's a contradictory pasuk. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Yehu, I see you to be an exceptionally pious individual. You're going to help me eradicate the idolatry of Yeravam." Yet the pasuk then says that Yehu himself fell prey to the idolatry of the house of Yeravam. So what's going on over here? My garmale. What caused Yehu to mess up? Abaye bris crucilis vasayim. So interestingly enough, Abaye says there is a covenant made with the lips. What does that mean? That when a tzaddik says something, Rabosai, even if he doesn't mean it, those words take on a reality. Shneimar achav avad habal ma'at Yehu ya'avdenu harbe. So I'll say Yehu has a plan to get rid of Baal. Baal is an avodah zarah, so he has a plan to get rid of Baal. What's his plan? He makes a proclamation when he becomes king. He's the king of Malchus Yisrael, and he says, "Listen, here's the deal. You guys think that Achav was an idolater? I'm going to be even a bigger idolater. So let's throw a major, a major idolatry party, right? The idol palooza. Let's get everybody together. And what's going to happen?" And he gets his whole chap is get everybody together. He surrounds the massive central Baal temple with his soldiers, and then he tells his soldiers to go in and kill everyone. That's how he wipes out the entire Baal cult in one fell swoop. There's only one problem, says the Gemara. When a tzaddik says something, those words take on a reality. And a tzaddik goes, he said, I'm even going to be even a bigger Baal worshipper. The fact that he made that statement ultimately, again, entrapped him in certain idolatrous practices himself. To the point that even later on in life, he becomes wrapped up in some idolatry as well. We'll say an incredible mussar into the power of words. That when the tzaddik says something, and by the way, it's not just the tzaddik, but it's all of us, when you see something, those words create a reality. And even if I don't mean for those words to create a reality, they do. The Gemara goes right to Rava. Rava says, Others say that no, what messed Yehu up in the end is that he saw this letter, the proclamation of Yeravam, like the charter of his kingdom that was signed by Achi Ashiloni. He saw the prophet of Israel signed on a document that said, if the king commands you to worship Avodah Zarah, you should do so. So he didn't understand how the prophet of Israel signed on this. So he thought, well, maybe idolatry is not as bad as I thought it was. Dichsiv, because he quotes over here the pasuk from Hosea, V'shachata seitim ha'emiku va'ani mosr lekulum. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Heim ha'emiku mishali. The Rebbe Shalom says, Klal Yisrael has been even more machmir than me. How so? Ani amarti kol she'ino ola l'regel over ba'aseh. I said, whoever isn't ola l'regel, whoever doesn't descend, violates a positive commandment. V'heim amru kol ola l'regel yidaker b'cherev. Yet Yerava ben Nevat said, whoever is ola regel, right? If you try to go to Yerushalayim from Malchus Yisrael, you'll be stabbed. I'll kill you. V'nei ba'esahi v'Yeravam yotzim Yerushalayim. So also listen to this. It wasn't that time that Yeravam left Yerushalayim. Vayimatze osa Achia Shiloni Anavi b'derech v'miskase b'salma chadasha. So what happens? Yeravam ben Nevat is leaving Yerushalayim. Now remember again, just so we understand, up until before Yeravam, so the Malchus, the monarchy is consolidated under the reign of Shlomo. Under the reign of Rechavam. Then ultimately, again, Rechavam makes some very bad decisions, and there is a split in the monarchy. Achia Shiloni tells Yeravam ben Nevat, who was a righteous man, at first was a righteous man, he was corrupted by power, right? Or I say he allowed power to corrupt him. Ultimately, again, then Achia Shiloni tells Yeravam, you are going to be the first king over the split kingdom of Yisrael. So Achia Shiloni finds Yeravam ben Nevat in the field. He's wearing a new garment. This time was preordained. What the Gemara is picking up on is, it says, Vayhi ba'isahi, and it was in that moment. The Gemara just points out the lashon of Vayhi, and it was in that moment means that this time was set aside for this catastrophic event of the split in Malchus Yisrael. Be'ez pikudasam yovedu, tan mishrav yosi, eis mizumenas l'paranos. Be'ez ratzon inisicha, tan mishrav yosi, eis mizumenas l'tova. Ubiyon pakti upakarati aleim chatas, tan mishrav yosi, eis mizumenas l'paranos. So we'll say the idea, Vayhi ba'isahi, Vayirei Judah me'is echav, tan mishrav yosi, eis mizumenas l'paranos. We'll say the idea is whenever you see that lashon of Vayhi ba'isi, it was in that moment, that means that this particular time was set aside for something dramatic to occur. Vayelech Rechavam Shechem, ki Shechem ba kol Yisrael lahamlich oso. And Rechavam, Rabbi said Rechavam was the son of Shlomo HaMelech, goes to Shechem because it was in Shechem that they decided to coronate him. Tanush Rabbi Yossi, makom mezuman laparanos. Rabbi said Shechem is a place in which terrible events occur. B'Shechem inu as Dina, it's in Shechem that Dina was abducted and raped. B'Shechem machru as Yosef, it was in Shechem that Yosef was sold by his brothers. And B'Shechem nechlaka malchus beis David, and it was in Shechem, I will say, that the official rupture in the kingdom of Klal Yisrael, making into two kingdoms, Malchus Yehuda and Malchus Yisrael, occurred. V'Yeravam yatza miYerushalayim, and Yeravam left Yerushalayim. So I'll say, what does that mean? Says I'm going to be cleaning about Papa. Shiyatza piska sheYerushalayim. Also is interesting. He removed himself from like the tax rolls of Yerushalayim. Meaning, when he left Yerushalayim, he renounced his Yerushalayim citizenship. I am no longer a citizen of Yerushalayim. Vayimatze osa Achi Ashiloni Hanavi b'derech v'miskasa b'salma chadasha u'shneim levadam basada. And Achi Ashiloni finds him, and he's wearing a new garment, and they're both alone in the field. My b'salma chadasha. What does it mean he was wearing a new garment? Amrav Nachman kis salma chadasha. That Yeravam ben Nevat was like a new garment. What does that mean? Ma salma chadasha ein ba shum dofi. Just like a new garment has absolutely no imperfection. After Rasa shal Yeravam lo haya ba shum dofi. So to the Torah of Yeravam had no imperfections. I say Yeravam ben Nevat was chosen because he was a righteous man. He was a righteous man who was an exceptional Talmid Chacham. He was chosen to be the king because even though there was a decree that the Malchus would split, the hope would be that the kings of both kingdoms ultimately would be righteous individuals. Davar achar, salma chadasha, shechidshu dvarim shelo shamu ozen me'olam. Others say that what does it mean that he was like a new garment? That he said things that no one ever heard before. He had chidushim, he had novel Torah ideas that no one had ever heard before. Ushneim levada basada, and they were both alone in the field. Amar Yehuda Amarav, shekol tamidei chachamim domim lefneim ki isvei asada. That between Achi Ashiloni and Yeravam ben Nevat, they were so great in their learning that all the other Torah scholars were like grass, like blades of grass in their presence. The Ikeda Amar, others explain, Shekol Tami Torah Megulan Lahem Kisada, that all of the reasons of Torah were revealed to them, just like a field. Just like a field is revealed and visible, so too all the deeper meaning of Torah was revealed to them and visible. Lochein, Titni Shluchim Amoresh as Gat. So here, the Gemara is quoting over here from the Pasuk. From Micha, Lochein Titni Shluchim Amoresh as Gat, Bate Achziv La'achzov L'Malchei Yisrael. So what does this mean? Amar Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa Yatsa Bas Kava Amar Lahen. We'll say first of the widest lines on Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. So Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa said Yatsa Bas Kava Amar Lahen. Misha Harag Es HaPlishti V'Horish Eschem Gat. He who went ahead and killed the Plishti, a reference to David HaMelech killing Goliath, and went ahead V'Horish Eschem Gat, allowed you to inherit the city of Gat. We'll say David HaMelech conquered Gat, which was one of the Philistine strongholds. Titnu shiluchim labanov. You're going to go ahead and you're going to send his son away, meaning it was Musar to Malchus Yisrael. Really, you're forsaking the Davidic kingdom, which gave you so much. You're forsaking the Davidic kingdom, the descendants of David HaMelech, who fought so hard for you. Bati achziv la'achzav l'malchei Yisrael. Literally, you are accepting upon yourself homes of falsehoods from Malchus Yisrael. So the idea over here is Kadosh Baruch Hu is lamenting the fact that Klal Yisrael is giving up the genuine monarchy of David HaMelech's line for the sheker, for the falsehood of Malchus Yisrael. Amar Rav Chanina Bar Papa, Kol hanena min ha'olam hazeh b'lo bracha, kilu goz la Kadosh Baruch Hu. We'll say if you partake of this world, you benefit from this world without a bracha. So you eat food without a bracha, it's as if you are stealing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and stealing from Klal Yisrael. Meaning the world belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to be enjoyed by Klal Yisrael, by all humanity, with the understanding that you ask permission, with the understanding that you express gratitude. So if you eat something without a bracha, it is as if you are stealing. Shnei Amar, Gozel Aviv V'Ima V'Omer in Pesha. If a person steals from his father and mother, but yet he pretends like he didn't do anything wrong, ultimately, again, he is a brother, right? He is a brother, ultimately, again, to the destroyer. Ve'in aviv ela HaKadosh Baruch Hu. His father is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shneimar halo hu avicha konecha. Ve'in imo el knesses Yisrael. And his mother, ultimately, is Klal Yisrael. Shneimar, shma b'ni musar avicha latito shtarisimecha. My chaver hu li'ish mashches. We'll say, what does it mean that if a person partakes of this road without making a bracha, and he's stealing from his father, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, stealing from his mother, Klal Yisrael, that ultimately, because we'll say, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that we are using the world irresponsibly, and we're not expressing proper gratitude or taking proper permission. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes back some of the bracha. So he's stealing from Klal Yisrael. But what does it mean that he's a partner, ultimately, again, to the Ish Mashchis, who is a destructive individual? Who? Yeravam ben Nevat. We both say the Ish Mashchis, the destructive individual, that is Yeravam ben Nevat. Shehishchis Yisrael la'avim shebashamayim. Because he ultimately, again, destroyed Klal Yisrael's relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. Vayidach, so we'll say, it's actually really amazing. What the Gemara is saying over here, we'll say, is that if a person goes ahead, the idea is that if you partake of this world without making a bracha, essentially the Gemara is saying over here is you're an ingrate. You're an ingrate. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you everything. All he asks is that you recognize his role in the food that you're eating. All he asks is that you recognize his role in providing that which you have. And if you don't do that, then you're no better than Yeravam ben Nevat. So we'll say, what was Yeravam ben Nevat's downfall? He was an ingrate. Yeravam ben Nevat was handed the monarchy on a divine silver platter. Yeravam ben Nevat was chosen by HaKadosh Baruch Hu because Yisrael believed in it. And then what does he do? He allows his power to go to his head. He becomes a Bal Gaiva. It all becomes about him, and he literally cuts HaKadosh Baruch Hu out of the picture. When you partake of something in this world and you don't make a bracha, you are cutting HaKadosh Baruch Hu out of the picture. So mamish like I become like Yeravam ben Nevat. A very dramatic Gemara. Vayidach Yeravam ben Nevat Yisrael me'acharei Hashem v'echtiam chata gidola. So Yerava ben Nevat caused Klal Yisrael to leave HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he caused them to sin a great sin. Amar Rabbi Chanin, kishtei maklos hamatizal zu azu. It's like two sticks. When you bang them against each other, both sides, they both are propelled back in opposite directions. Yerava ben Nevat caused Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu to go in two separate directions. V'di zahav. So we'll say now we're jumping back to the eagle for just a moment. Now that we mentioned the golden calves of Yerava ben Nevat, we're spending a few moments speaking about the golden calves, the golden calf in the desert, the Zahav. So remember again, in the beginning of Chumash Devarim, one of the places that the Torah says that Klal Yisrael that they stayed in was a place called Zahav. There's only one problem. There's no place called Zahav. So what does Zahav mean? Amru debei Rabbi Yanai, Amra Moshe lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu said the following: Ribono shel olam, b'shel kesef v'zav she'eshpat elam Yisrael ad sheyomru dai, karam lohem lasos lahem elokei zahav. So Moshe Rabbeinu tries to defend Klal Yisrael in the aftermath of the Chet HaEgel. And what does he say? He says, God, I don't want to assign blame for the sin of the golden calf, but it's your fault. Why is it your fault? Because you let them leave Egypt with so much money, so much gold, so much silver, and what? Of course, they were going to mess up. I will say, so Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's like giving $1 million trust fund to an 18-year-old. What do you think is going to happen, right? What do you think is going to happen? So here, these people were slaves. You let them leave, not just with money, but fabulously wealthy. So they had this excess of gold, this excess of silver, and therefore it's only a matter of time until they messed up in some dramatic way. So Mashal, the Gemara says, he gives Mashal ein ari doris v'noim mitoch kupa shel teven elu mitoch kupa shel basar. The lion only roars not when he's eating from a trough filled with straw, but only when he's eating from a trough filled with meat. The idea is that the roar of the lion is an expression of he's satiated. So the idea is he only becomes a Baal Gaiva when he's got meat in his belly. You gave Klal Yisrael all of this money. What do you think is going to happen? Rashi gives a more dramatic mashal. Rashi in Chumash gives dramatic mashal that if a man gives his son a purse filled with gold coins and places him at the entrance of a brothel, what do you think is going to occur? So Ribono shel olam, you go ahead and you gave Klal Yisrael all. He's not going to be giving tzedakah, that we know, right? So meaning at the end of the day, you gave Klal Yisrael all of this money. What did you think is going to happen? Amar Rav Oshia, Adi Ravam, HaYisrael Yonkim Me'egel Echad. So Rav Oshia says, unfortunately, until Yerava ben Nevat, Klal Yisrael, literally Yonkim means they were nursing. They only had to deal with the fallout of one golden calf. Mikan ve'elech, mishnayim u'shlosha golden. And now, unfortunately, after Yerava ben Nevat, we've got 2 and 3 golden calves. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Ein l'chol kol paros is a very dramatic Gemara. Ein l'chol kol paranos u'paranos sheba li olam she'im ba echad me'esem v'arba be'achreya litra shel egel harishon. I'll say the Gemara essentially says every single calamity that befalls Klal Yisrael, there's some little bit of it that is linked to the Chet HaEgel, that is linked to the golden calf. Now literally it means 1/24 of the weight of the measure that's used in measuring out dry measures. So remember again, we saw in our Baba Kama days that if you're a merchant and you're measuring out dry measures, you always tip the scales a little bit in favor of the customer, lest again there be some kind of weight erosion on your weights and measures. So that's called the litra. So what the Gemara is saying is it's a small amount, but every single calamity that befalls Klal Yisrael, there's some element of retribution for the sin of the golden calf. What Rabbi Yitzchak is saying, Rabosa, is the sin of the golden calf was such a dramatic and traumatic mistake that we are still to a certain degree suffering with the fallout of it to this very day. Fallout from it this very day. So the Gemara says, Shenei Amaro B'yom Pakti Opakarati Aleim Chatasem Am Rabbi Chanina La'achar Esrim V'Arba Doros Nigba Pasuk Zeh. Rabbi Chanina says, no, in fact, the debt for the golden calf has already been paid. After 24 generations, we have already paid our debt for this sin. Shnei Amar, Va'ikra Ba'aznai Kol Gadol Leimor, Kirvu Pakdos Ha'ir, V'ish Kol Mishchas B'yado. Achar Ha'advar Mazeh, suppose the Gemara goes weiter. Achar Ha'advar Mazeh, Lo Shav Yerava Midar Klara. Even after all of these things, Yerava ben Nevat did not do tshuva. My achar, what does that mean? So we'll say, get ready for this. Get ready for this Gemara. This will say, okay. So if you're just joining our program now, I draw your attention to the last 3 lines of Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. For both sides, a dramatic Gemara. Achar dvarim lo shav Yiravam midarka ra. My achar amar Abba achar shetavsa Kodesh Baruch Hu Yiravam bevigdo. Both say, listen to this. The Ribono Shel Olam grabbed Yiravam ben Nevat by his bekisha, right? He grabbed him ultimately again by the lapels of his clothing. And he says, V'amar lo, chazor b'cha. We'll say, he says, Yiravam ben Nevat, do tshuva. We'll say, Yiravam ben Nevat was a great tzaddik. He was chosen by HaKadosh Baruch Hu because he was a great man. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu kiviyachal grabs Yiravam ben Nevat and he says, do tshuva. What are you doing? Why? I've given you everything. I've given you power. I've given you wealth. I've given you dominion. The malchus is yours. Just be a tzaddik. Listen to this. Va'ani va'ato ben Yishai netayel began Eden. Me, you, and David HaMelech, in the afterlife, we will walk together in Gan Eden. The Ribono Shel Olam is inviting him to a front row seat in Gan Eden along with David HaMelech. And what does Yiravam ben Nevat say? Amar lo, umi barosh. Tell me, who's first in line? Right? Who walks first? Well, right, the 3 of us, we're not going to walk in a straight row. Right? Who walks first? God. I got it. You're God. You're obviously going to go in front. Right? But after you, who goes first? Me or David HaMelech? So he says, Ben Yishai barosh. He says, listen, Yiravam, you're a good guy and everything, don't get me wrong, right? But you know David HaMelech, right? I knew David HaMelech, you know David HaMelech, right? So meaning, at the end of the day, David HaMelech is going to go first. So, Ihachi, lo ba'ina. Yiravam ben Nevat says, okay, no thank you. No thank you. And we'll say, you see the power of Gaiva? Say, you laugh, Yiravam ben Nevat. And we'll say, people do this every single day. Maisim b'chol yom. Oh, it's not going to satisfy my ego. No, thank you. I'm not first. I'm not most important. I'm not prominent. I'm not dominant. No, thank you. It's a beautiful opportunity. Who cares if you're first? Who cares if it strokes you? You don't need your ego to be stroked. You don't need your ego. It's not about your ego. It's about getting things done in life. Say, Maisim b'chol yom. Yiravam ben Nevat not only gives up Olam Haba, Yiravam ben Nevat gives up the opportunity to spend eternity with the Ribono Shel Olam. Why? Because David HaMelech gets first in line. And he's number 2. I will say, if he was offered number 10, if he was offered number 10,000, he should take it. Because at the end of the day, the ability to be in proximity with the Kadosh Baruch Hu was the greatest gift in life. But I will say, unfortunately, Yiravam ben Nevat condemns himself to a lifetime of I don't know what happens to Yiravam ben Nevat, all because of his ego. All because of his gaiva. Or I will say, because, again, I will say, you understand something. This is just an aside. I have no time for this, but I'm going to make time for it. I will say, you understand, by the way, that people who are ridiculous bali gaiva, ridiculously arrogant, well, say, you know where that comes from? It comes from insecurities. Remember, at the end of the day, why did Yiravam ben Nevat do what he did? All of this stems. Remember how this whole downward spiral begins? The whole downward spiral begins with the two golden calves, which initially wasn't even supposed to be Avodah Zarah. It was supposed to be worship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just this will be the Beis HaMikdash, because he was scared of losing his power. He was scared of losing his power. He was scared they would go to David and the other shul, right? He was scared that they would go ahead and they would defect. Instead, what he should have said was, listen, you know what? I can't control what people do. The only thing I can control is the type of leader I am. I'm going to be a good leader. I'm going to love my people. I'm going to be a beneficent ruler. I'm going to devote myself to building my kingdom. If they stay, if they go, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But he was so insecure about his ability to be a leader that it creates this ripple effect that begins with the golden calves and then institutionalized idolatry and then all things, but all what? All in an effort to simply hold on to his power. He was insecure about his ability to hold on to it as a mensch. So he becomes an Naya mensch, right? I can't hold on to it. If I'm a Yorei Hashem, so I have to do these other things. And unfortunately, again, it becomes his very own thing. Could have been a great king. Could have been a great man who would have held on to his monarchy, who would have held on to his constituents, even with being a great tzaddik. And even if they would have gone to Yerushalayim 3 times a year, he still would have held on to his monarchy. But he was so insecure that he overcompensated by becoming a ridiculous Baal Gaiva. We'll say, which is very important, because sometimes if we're a little bit Gaiva-dick, we have to realize that really what it bespeaks is an insecurity. There's a little boy in there that is insecure about something. So the shaila is, how do I address my insecurities, make myself a whole person, and not allow my gaiva to run away with me? The Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Avo used to often give shiurim about the three kings who the Mishnah speaks out who don't have a chelik in Olam Haba. What happens? Chalash. He got sick. Kabil alei delo darish. So he thought maybe I'm being punished. We'll say Zagana Amuna. Right? Maybe I got sick. I'm getting punished. Why? Because maybe I'm speaking disparaging. Maybe I'm speaking too much about the bad kings. Kevan this the Ispatak. So what happens? He's healed. So therefore, both say what he decides ultimately is Kabbalah Lo Darish. He makes a Kabbalah. He decides I'm not going to teach about the three kings anymore. The Isbach. So he got healed. Hadar Kadarish. He once again begins to give shir about the three kings. Amri lo Kabbalah salach lo darashtabos. So as Talmidim said, Rabbi, didn't you make a Kabbalah that you're not going to teach about the three kings anymore? So listen to this. Amar inu mi hadrubu da ana hadarbe. So he says, I don't understand. They didn't do tshuva, so I should do tshuva. Okay, so what does that mean? So he felt at the end of the day, he thought maybe his sickness was attributable ultimately again to the fact that he was speaking about the three kings. But then upon further reflection, he understood that no, it's important to teach about these kings because Rabbi say we learn from the accomplishments of people, we learn from the mistakes of people as well. Now Rabbi say the Gemara tells a dramatic story. Dramatic story. Kuf Beis Amud Beis 102b, 3 lines down. Ravashi, get ready for this. Ravashi, Uki Hashoshim Malachim. Ravashi was giving shir about the three evil kings. Amar, Lemachar Niftach Bechavrin. Tomorrow we're going to learn about our buddies. Ravashi was referring to the three kings, right? The three kings. So I'll say he spoke about them in a disparaging manner. Now again, at first glance, you're allowed to speak about the Rishayim in a disparaging manner. So what happens? So he goes in and he speaks about them. If I have time. Okay, we'll see. Fine. So he speaks about them in a disparaging manner. So what happens? So also listen to this. Asa Menashe's Chazlei B'Chamed. That night, King Menashe. Also, he was one of the Rishayim. Remember, we spoke about him. He reigns for 55 years. Menashe appears to him in a dream. Menashe appears to Ravashi in a dream. Amar, Chavrech v'chaveri da'avucha karislan. Right? Chutzpah. Ravashi, you're a mechutzaf. You call us, your buddies, your friends. What do you think? We're friends of yours or friends of your fathers? Mehecha bayis l'mishra hamotzi. You're so great. Let me ask you a simple shaila. From where on the loaf should you make hamotzi? Simple shaila. From where on the loaf should you make hamotzi? Amrlei lo yadana. Ravash says, I don't know. I never heard that there's a particular part of the loaf that you're supposed to make hamotzi on. Amrlei mehecha debais l'sigdimar. Amrlei mehecha debais l'mishra hamotzi lo gemiras v'chavrich karislan. Tell me, Ravashi. This is Menashe Ravashi. You don't even know where on the loaf to make hamotzi from. And you call me your friend? In other words, you're a mechutzaf. Who are you? You don't know me, right? You don't know me. You don't know my life. You don't know my struggles. And you have the chutzpah to speak about me. I was the Melech Yisrael for 55 years. You have the chutzpah to speak about me in demeaning terms. Amalei Ravashi is obviously, I would imagine a bit overwhelmed. Amalei Agmareli ulamachar darshina le mishmech beperka. So Ravashi says, King Menashe, teach me the halacha. And I promise you that tomorrow I will teach my Talmidim this halacha in your name. Amrlei mehecha dekarim bishula. I will say, where do you make hamotzi from? From the crust. Dekarim bishula. Ultimately, again, from the crust of the bread. I will say, by the way, that happens to the halacha l'maisa. That when making hamotzi, the first bite that a person should take should be from the crust. The crust is considered to be the best part of the bread. Amrlei, now that you're such a Talmud Chacham, my time a kapal chisu la'avodas kochavim. So Moshe, listen to this exchange. So Rav Ashi says to Menashe, first of all, I'm sorry, no hard feelings, right? No, I didn't mean. But again, you were like a ridiculous oved avodah zara, right? You weren't just like a recreational idolater, mamish. Like you were 24/7. You were into this stuff. So if you're a great Talmud Chacham, so why did you worship avodah zara? So listen to what Menashe says. Ihavis Hasam. I'll tell you one thing, Ravashi. If you lived in the times that I lived, Havanaktina b'shipuli gelima v'rates abasrai lebasrai. So he says, I want to tell you something. If you lived when I lived, you would have lifted your cloak up even higher than I did, so that you could run faster than me to go worship idolatry. What Menashe was telling Ravashi is, you don't understand the times in which I live. Remember again, by the times of Ravashi, Chazal already davened for what? For the Yetzirah, for idolatry to be removed from this world. So they already couldn't relate to it. So Menashe says, you just don't understand. You don't understand what life was like. You don't understand what the pushes and pulls were like. You don't understand what the draw was like. But I promise you one thing. You think I'm a bad guy? Had you lived in my times, you would have been even a bigger idol worshiper than me. Lemachar Amar Lehu L'Rabbanan Naftach B'Rabusa. I will say the next day, when Rav Ashi begins the shir, he says to the Talmidim, let's begin learning about our teachers. So he begins to refer to even these evil kings in a deferential tone. Achav, so we'll say there's a lot to say about why Menashe chose that halacha, right? Why that halacha about the bread, but I'll have to save it to a different time. Achav, ach l'shamayim, av la'avodas kochavim. We'll say achav is a contraction. Ach l'shamayim, we'll say ach means like oi. Oi, right? When he was like oi to Shammai, meaning his behavior was so terrible in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he was a father to idolatry. Ach l'shamayim d'chsiv, ach l'tzar yuladav. Excuse me, ach l'tzar yulad. Av la'avodas kochavim d'chsiv kirachim av abanim. V'ineh vayhi. Supposed to the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Malachim Aleph. Vayhi anok yalechto bechatos Yeravam ben Nevat. Amar Rabbi Yochanan kalos she'asa achav. Kichamuros she'asa Yeravam. So we'll remember again. So Achav comes after, not directly after, but later on after Yeravam ben Nevat. So ultimately again, the Chamuros, the little sins that Achav did were the equivalent of the great sins of Yeravam ben Nevat. Meaning, as bad as Yeravam was, Achav was even worse. So ultimately again, why does the Navi attribute the negative behaviors of Achav to Yeravam? Very simply, because Yeravam ben Nevat was the one who started all of the negative behaviors. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ein lecha kol telem utelem be'eretz Yisrael, shelo hemed alav acha avodas kochavim. There was not one mound of earth in all of Eretz Yisrael, in Malchus Yisrael, that Achav did not introduce idolatry. Meaning, I will say, so Yeravam introduced institutionalized idolatry, but at least what? It was in specific locations. Achav introduces idolatry all throughout the land. How do we know that Achav didn't have a portion in the world to come? Because the pasuk says, "V'chrasi la'achav mashtin bikir v'atzun v'azu b'Yisrael atzur ba'olam hazeh v'azuv la'olam haba." So we'll say the double lashon indicates to us that Achav was lost his life in this world and has no portion in the world to come. Mipnei ma zacha Omri lemalchus. So we'll say this is amazing. Omri was the father of Achav. Omri was the father of Achav. So why is it that Omri merited to be the king? This is actually quite amazing. Because Omri added on one city in Eretz Yisrael. Shneimar, Vayik, we'll say first of the widest line, Vayikar asahar shomron me'esh shamar v'kikar kesef, Vayiven asahar, Vayikar shema'ir shabana sham, shamar adoni, shamar adoni ahar shomron. So we'll say, listen to this. So Omri is credited with one thing. What's the one thing Rabbi was saying? Eretz Yisrael. He added on to the territorial area of Eretz Yisrael. So we'll say, by the way, this actually was the merit of many of the kings of Malchus Yisrael. They were terrible guys. Terrible guys. I shouldn't say that. Menashe is going to appear to me in a dream. Right? But they were challenged. They were challenged. Right? They were individuals who were not exceptionally pious. Interestingly enough, the one zechus they always had going for them was what? They built Eretz Yisrael. They built Eretz Yisrael. I will say this is like a tenet in Cookian philosophy, right? In Rav Kook, right? Rav Kook has this yisod. This is why Rav Kook had such warm feelings, ultimately again, towards the mitnachalim, the original mitnachalim, right? Who sell their Eretz Yisrael, even though they were totally removed from any type of religious observance. You see historically that those who build Eretz Yisrael, even if they themselves are not personally religious individuals, are beloved in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These kings were incredible idolaters. To their credit, they built the land. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Both say, let's go back there. Why did Achav merit to reign 22 years? So this is going to blow your mind. Why? Because he gave honor to the Torah, which was given in 22 letters. So we'll say, what does this mean that he gave honor to the Torah? We'll say, get ready for this Maisa. Vayishlach malach, not a Maisa, it's Navi. Vayishlach malachim alachav melech Yisrael ha'ira vayomer lo. So we'll say, what happens? The king of Aram goes ahead and sends a message to Achav. What's the message, Rabbi Osai? Vayomer lo. Ko Amar ben Hadad. This is what Ben Hadad said. Kaspecha v'zahavcha lihu nashecha ubanecha tovim liheim kim ka'is machar eshlach es avdi elecha v'chipsu es beisecha v'esbate avadecha v'yakol machmad einecha yasim bi'adam v'lakchu. So Ben Hadad, essentially again, threatens to either conquer Eretz Yisrael, or essentially Achav could pledge his allegiance to Ben Hadad as a vassal state. So Achav chooses not to wage war because he feels he's going to wage the battle. So Ben Hadad says, essentially everything you have is mine. All of your gold, all of your silver, your women, your children, everything is mine. Kol machmat einecha. Everything, that which is essentially like the apple of your eye, the greatest treasure of your eye. So the Yomer l'malchei Ben Hadad, Amr l'Adoni HaMelech, Kol esher shlachta l'avdecha el avdecha b'rishon eseh, v'hadavar hazeh lo ucha lasos. So King, everything we have is yours. The gold is yours, the silver is yours, the women are yours, the children, everything is yours. But that one thing you asked for, that machmad einecha, sorry, can't give you that. My machmad einecha, Rabbi said, what does that mean? Lav Sefer Torah. Rabbi said that machmad einecha is amazing. Achav says, I'll give you everything, but I won't give you our Sefer Torah. I won't give you, whether it means the Sefer Torah, ultimately again of Moshe Rabbeinu, whatever it meant, but the Sefer Torah we're not giving you. So the Gemara said, well, how do you know it means the Sefer Torah? Dilma avodas kochavim. Maybe it refers to idolatry, meaning maybe Ben Hadad wanted their idols, and Achav says, no, I'm not giving you my idols. No, because the elders said, don't listen to Ben Hadad, don't give him the machmad einecha. Well, maybe the Dilma Sabid, so we'll say the assumption always is that Zikinim refers to righteous or pious elders. Well, maybe that Vidilma Sabid Davasahavu, maybe it was the elders of idolatry. Milo Ksiv Vayisha Davar Be'enei Avshalom Vaskinim Ube'enei Kol Ziknisha V'Amrav Yosef Sabid Davasa. So we'll say in the context of Avshalom, for example, when it speaks about the elders, these were elders of idolatry. So maybe over here it means elders of idolatry as well. Hasam Lo Ksiv V'Chala'am Hach Ksiv V'Chala'am. But here's the difference. By Avshalom, it doesn't say the entire nation. Here it says the entire nation. The Efshar Delo Chalav Bahon Tzadiki. And I will say in the entire nation there must have been righteous people. Uksiv V'Sharti V'Yisrael Shivas Alafim Kol Aberechem Ashalo Karu Lebal V'Chol Aper Shalom Noshak Lo. So we'll say ultimately again, we know that even in the midst of Malchus Yisrael, which was an idolatrous Malchus, there were tzaddikim. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here, we'll say, this in general is always the yesod. Even the most corrupt and idolatrous of kings has that pintaliyid, right? He has that spark in him, and when pushed back into the corner, his kedusha will come out. So Achav, who has institutionalized idolatry throughout the land, when Ben Hadad says, "I want your Torah," what does Achav say? I'll give you my gold, I'll give you everything. I'm not giving you my Torah. Really, Achav? When was the last time you came to Daf Yomi? Right? When was the last time you opened up a Chumash? When was the last time you learned the Torah? When was the last time you davened the Shachris? And of course the answer would be, couldn't remember the last time. But it didn't make a difference. At the end of the day, I'm a Jew. At the end of the day, I'm never going to give my Torah. I might be Achav. I might be the guy who's worshipping idolatry. But at the end of the day, I know what's right. And I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the real God. I worship all this other stuff for convenience. I worship all this other stuff because it consolidates my rulership over the monarchy. But the Ribono Shel Olam is the one and only God. So Ben Hadad, I'll give you everything, but I won't give you my Torah. We'll say quite incredible. Rav Nachman, Achav Shakul Haya. Rav Nachman says Achav actually had an equal number of mitzvahs and an equal number of averos. Shakul means his scales were exactly equal. Shnei Amar, Vayomer Hashem, Mi Yifates Achav, Vaya Vayipal Baramos Gilad, Vayomer Zebekov Zebekov. So we'll say the idea is that the Ribono Shel Olam says to the neshamas, to the spirits, who will entice Achav that he'll go out to war in Ramot Gilad and he was going to die in that battle. So each of these spirits say, this one says this one says that. We'll discuss what that means. So what's that? The idea is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't just kill Achav because apparently Achav's mitzvos and averos were equal. So he needed someone from the spirits, one of the spirits, to go and entice Achav to go out to war. Maskil Yosef. So we'll say, how could it be? The pasuk says, when speaking about future kings, they say, this king was bad, but at least what? They weren't as bad as Achav. So we'll say, like, Achav is the example, is the paradigm of the worst. So how can you say that his mitzvos and averos were equal? So we'll say, the Gemara says, Ashar hista also Izevel ishto, because his wife Izevel enticed him to sin a lot. V'tanina, and the Gemara says v'chol yom haisa shokelas shikle zav la'avodas kochavim. So we'll say again, Izevel every single day would give a golden shekel to avodah zarah. We'll say it's a huge amount of money. Every single day she would give a golden shekel to avodah zarah. Va'at amrit shekel haya. So we'll say the Navi says essentially that when comparing bad kings to someone, if you want to compare someone against the worst is Achav. And you're going to tell me that his mitzvahs and averos were equal? Ella, you're right. Achav vachra ma'amona haya. We'll say this is actually amazing. Achav was a pretty bad guy, but you know what? He was a Baal tzedakah. Amazingly enough, he was a Baal tzedakah, I will say. He might have been pretty bad, but he was exceptionally generous. Umitoch shehena tamidei chacham min chasav kipro lo mechza. And because he supported Torah, because he gave money to Talmidei Chachamim, the Ribbon Shalom absolved him of half of his Averos. So what's an incredible yisod? The power of tzedakah. Again, don't try this, but at the end of the day, you can apparently, even if you're the worst Oved Avodah Zarah, but you're a generous individual, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wipes out half of your sins. Now, of course, even if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wipes out half of your sins, remember, you still have the other half to contend with. So I just want to point this out. Okay, wiped out half of his Rabbi say an incredible yisod about the power of being generous, the power of being vachron. So also remember again, the Spirit comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, I will be the one who entices Achav to go out to war, the war ultimately which would end his life. Vayomer eitze vayisi ruach sheker befi kol neviav. Vayomer tifta v'gam tuchal tzei v'asei kain. So we'll say, so what happens? The Spirit comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says, I will entice Achav. So God says to the Spirit, Nu, how are you going to entice Achav to go to war? So the Spirit says, I will be the Spirit who rests upon the false prophets, and these false prophets will tell Achav that he should go out to war in Ramot Gilad, and he'll be successful. So Baruch says, fine, go, do this, v'tzei. My ruach, so we'll say, whose ruach is this? Which spirit is this? Rabbi Yochanan, ruach shal Navos hayizraeli. This was the ruach, this was the spirit of Navos. So we'll say, who was Navos? Remember again, we know the story. Achav wanted a particular vineyard, which belonged to Navos. Navos would not sell. So Achav tells Izevel concocts this whole story that Navos rebelled against the king and cursed God. Navos is executed, and when you are executed, the king gets your property. So Navos' spirit is looking for revenge. Might say, what does it mean, go out? Amravina, say mechitzasi. Ribono Shalom says, spirit of Navos, if you're going to do this and essentially lie, you can no longer dwell within my mechitza. Shekein ksiv, dover shkaran lo yikol neged einai. Ultimately, again, because the pasuk says, he who speaks falsehoods cannot exist with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Ribono Shalom says to the spirit of Navos, you can do this, but if you do this, you can no longer reside in my mechitza. And I will say, now what's the amazing part of the story? What's the amazing part of the story? That the spirit of Navos still what? Decides to go through with it. So Rabbi say, which will end with this. Amar Papa Hanu Darmi Inshi Depara Kine Machriv Beisei. As Rabbi Papa says, this is an example of that which people say, that he who is bent on vengeance destroys his own home. I will say there are some people who are so desperate for revenge that they will do anything and everything for revenge. If unfortunately a person has that destructive midah, they will destroy his own home. I will say, can you imagine this? Navos, the spirit of Navos, is so bent on revenge that he is willing to go ahead and be the false spirit in the eyes of the false prophets or in the hearts of the false prophets, even though what does that vengeance cost him? That vengeance costs him his closeness, his ability to dwell within the mechitza of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If a person is so bent on vengeance, unfortunately, again, they destroy anything and everything within their lives. We'll stop over and pick up here in Meretz Hashem tomorrow.